The night Oluwaseun Adebayo was born, rain fell softly over Lagos, as though the heavens themselves had come to bless the Adebayo household. Mrs. Beatrice Adebayo lay weak but smiling, her arms wrapped tightly around the tiny life she had waited years for. After several painful losses and endless prayers, she finally had a child, a son. Not just a son, but the only one she would ever have. Her husband, Chief Adewale Adebayo, stood beside the bed with tears he did not bother to hide. A powerful man in business and society, he was feared in boardrooms and respected in high places. Yet at that moment, he was simply a grateful father. He whispered promises into the baby's ears, promises of legacy, greatness, and protection. They named him Oluwaseun, meaning God has done well. For a brief period, life was perfect. But happiness, like a visitor in a hurry, did not stay long. Just a few years after Son's birth, tragedy struck the Adebayo family like a thunderbolt. Chief Adebayo died suddenly, leaving behind unanswered questions, unfinished dreams, and a grieving wife who had not yet learned how to live without him. Overnight, Beatrice's world collapsed. The man who had been her shield, her partner, and her strength was gone. At the funeral, Lagos stood still. Big men came in convoys. Politicians bowed their heads. Business rivals spoke kind words they had never spoken before. But none of it mattered to Beatrice. All she could see was her small son, clinging to her black lace wrapper, too young to understand why his father would never come home again. When the will was read, another shock followed. Everything, the companies, the estates, the shares, the accounts, was willed to Son, a child, the only heir. From that moment, Beatrice made a silent vow at her husband's grave. She would protect her son with everything in her. She would raise him to be worthy of the Adebayo name. No one would deceive him. No one would take advantage of him. And no matter the cost, she would ensure that her son never brought shame to the legacy his father died leaving behind. She did not realize then that love, when wrapped too tightly in fear, can become a cage. As she held Son close that night, listening to his innocent breathing, Beatrice whispered through her tears, "You are all I have now, and I will never let this world take you from me." Those words, spoken in pain and love, would shape both their destinies in ways she could never have imagined. The day the lawyers returned to the Adebayo mansion, the house felt different, quieter, heavier, as though the walls themselves understood what was about to be decided. Mrs. Beatrice Adebayo sat stiffly in the living room, dressed in mourning black, her eyes swollen from weeks of crying. Beside her sat little Son, his legs dangling off the chair, clutching a toy car his father had bought him just days before he died. He did not understand why strange men in suits kept calling his name. The reading of the will was meant to be a formality, but when the words were spoken, Beatrice felt her breath catch in her throat. Chief Adewale Adebayo had left everything to his son. Not some of it, not most of it, all of it. The companies that dominated Lagos markets, the estates that stretched across states, the accounts that could fund generations, the influence that opened doors before they were even knocked on. All of it belonged to a child who still needed help tying his shoes. Beatrice's heart trembled, not with pride, but with fear. She looked at Son and saw not wealth, but vulnerability. She saw a boy surrounded by sharks disguised as relatives, partners, and sympathizers. She saw a future filled with people smiling at him while calculating what they could take. In that moment, grief transformed into something else, control born out of terror. From that day on, Beatrice stepped into her husband's world like armor wrapping around a fragile heart. She learned contracts, meetings, negotiations, and power plays. She sat in boardrooms where men doubted her at first, then feared her later. Every decision she made carried one thought: this is for my son. She made it clear, nothing would be released to Son without her approval. Every account was locked under her supervision. Every investment passed through her hands. She convinced herself it was temporary, just until he was old enough, wise enough, strong enough. But deep down, Beatrice was afraid of something else. She was afraid of women. She had seen it happen before. Young heirs ruined by love, by manipulation, by sweet words whispered with greedy intentions. She promised herself that no woman would ever use affection to reach her son's inheritance. Love, she believed, was dangerous when mixed with wealth. So she raised Son carefully, almost too carefully. He grew up knowing his name carried weight. He was taught manners, discipline, and silence. While other children played freely, Son sat through meetings and etiquette lessons. While others dreamed loudly, he learned to observe quietly. Beatrice handled the world so he wouldn't have to. And every night, after the house grew quiet, she would stand at his bedroom door, watching him sleep, whispering prayers mixed with warnings only her heart could hear. "You must be strong," she would say softly. "You must be careful. This world does not love boys like you." She never imagined that the greatest danger would not come from strangers, but from the fear she wrapped around him in the name of protection. The legacy she guarded so fiercely was already becoming heavier than Son could carry. As the years passed, Mrs. Beatrice Adebayo became more than a grieving widow. She became a force. In Lagos business circles, people no longer spoke of Chief Adebayo without mentioning his wife. She sat where men twice her age once ruled, her voice calm, her gaze firm, her decisions final. They called her the Iron Lady behind closed doors, but to her face, they bowed with respect. Yet behind all the strength and confidence was a woman constantly afraid of losing the only thing that still mattered to her. Son. Every achievement she made, every contract she signed, every enemy she outsmarted was for him. She did not see herself as controlling his life. She believed she was saving it. To Beatrice, the world was full of traps, and her son was too soft-hearted to survive them alone. She became the gatekeeper to his future. She chose his schools, his tutors, his friends. She approved his movements and questioned his silences. Even his smiles did not escape her notice. If Son laughed too freely with someone, she would ask questions. If he became too comfortable around anyone, especially a woman, alarms rang loudly in her heart. She would often say, "Son, your father built an empire. You cannot afford to be distracted by foolishness. Focus." Foolishness was her code word for anything that she did not approve of, which was almost everything that brought her son personal joy. He learned to hide his passions. He learned to silence his desires. He learned to perform the role of the perfect son, the dutiful heir, while a part of him slowly suffocated under the weight of his mother's love. His life became a series of carefully managed events. Birthday parties were filled with the children of her business partners, not his actual friends. University was chosen not for the course, but for its proximity and her ability to monitor him. Even his car was a modest, sensible model, a deliberate choice by Beatrice to keep him from appearing too flashy, too tempting to opportunists. But a cage, even one gilded with wealth and love, is still a cage. Son grew into a man who was polite but distant, wealthy but never free. He was surrounded by luxury but starved of real connection. He knew how to sign checks worth millions, but didn't know how to ask a girl for her number. His mother's protection had become his prison, and he was beginning to see the bars. He longed for a life he could call his own, a mistake he could make and learn from, a love that wasn't vetted by the board of directors of his own life. The world saw a powerful matriarch grooming her successor. They saw a woman who had single-handedly protected her family's legacy against all odds. They saw a story of strength and resilience. But Son saw something else. He saw the woman behind the throne, the queen of his gilded cage, and he knew that one day he would have to find a way to escape. The question was, how do you break free from someone who loves you so much they are willing to destroy you to protect you? This silent battle was just beginning, and its outcome would define not just the Adebayo legacy, but the very soul of the only son. "Remember who you are," she often told him. "You are an Adebayo." Son grew up hearing those words more than, "I love you." While other young men learned to make decisions, Son learned to ask permission. His mother signed documents on his behalf, attended meetings meant for him, and spoke for him when his voice trembled. She convinced herself he was still learning, still growing. In truth, she was afraid of letting go, because letting go meant trusting the world. And Beatrice trusted no one. She saw women as the greatest threat, not out of hatred, but out of fear. Fear that someone would smile sweetly, fall in love quickly, and slowly drain the fortune she had bled to protect. She believed love could be a disguise, and marriage a transaction masked with emotions. So whenever society women were introduced to Son, daughters of senators, oil moguls, and traditional rulers, Beatrice watched closely. She smiled politely while studying their eyes, their gestures, their ambitions. One wrong move, and she quietly ended the connection. Son noticed, but he never complained. He loved his mother deeply. She was all he had ever known. In his eyes, she was strong, brilliant, and always right. If she said no, then no was the answer. If she warned him, then danger must be near. Slowly, without realizing it, Son surrendered his independence to please her. But in the quiet corners of his heart, something ached. He wanted to be seen, not as an heir, not as a name, not as a legacy, but as a man capable of choosing love for himself. Yet every time that desire rose, guilt followed closely behind. How could he disappoint the woman who gave up everything for him? And so, Mrs. Beatrice stood proudly behind the throne, convinced she was building a future for her son, never realizing she was also building the walls of the prison he lived in. Love guided her actions, but fear shaped them. And fear, when mistaken for protection, can change destinies forever. The Adebayo name. In Lagos, names opened doors long before voices did. And the name Adebayo did more than open doors. It commanded silence, respect, and attention. It was spoken carefully, praised openly, and envied quietly. Mrs. Beatrice Adebayo made sure of that. From charity galas to political fundraisers, from exclusive business luncheons to royal celebrations, the Adebayo family was always present, always visible, always admired. Their absence from an event was noticed just as much as their presence. To Beatrice, this was not pride, it was duty. The name you carry, she often told Son, is bigger than you. The Adebayo legacy was built on the idea of integrity, but integrity, in Beatrice's world, had rules. You did not mix with people beneath your class. You did not associate with scandals. You did not fall in love recklessly. And above all, you never gave society a reason to whisper your name with pity or mockery. Every public appearance was carefully curated. Son wore tailored suits even when he was too young to understand their value. He was trained to smile politely, speak little, and never reveal too much. Beatrice taught him that mystery was power and distance was respect. Behind closed doors, however, the pressure was immense. Son grew up hearing conversations about what people will say more than conversations about happiness. Beatrice worried constantly about headlines, rumors, and social media gossip. One scandal, she believed, could erase years of hard work. People are watching, she would say whenever Son questioned her decisions. Do you want them to laugh at us? Slowly, Son learned to measure his actions through the eyes of strangers he had never met. Beatrice surrounded herself with powerful allies, big names in business, politics, and society. These were the people she trusted, the people she wanted her son to emulate. Their daughters were appropriate. Their sons were worthy friends. Anyone outside that circle was invisible. The staff understood this clearly. The maids, drivers, and security guards were expected to remain in the background, seen but never noticed. They were employees, not people with stories, dreams, or feelings. Beatrice never meant to be cruel. She simply believed boundaries were necessary to maintain order. But boundaries, when drawn too sharply, can cut hearts. Son watched all of this quietly. He saw how differently his mother spoke to guests and staff. He noticed how laughter sounded louder in public than it did at home. He felt the weight of expectations pressing down on him. Be successful, be perfect, be careful. Sometimes, late at night, he wondered if the Adebayo name was a blessing or a burden. But he never asked aloud. Because in a family where reputation ruled above emotions, silence was the safest language of all. And so, under the shining image of integrity and success, the Adebayo household stood tall, unaware that the very standards meant to protect them were quietly setting the stage for their greatest heartbreak. A mummy's boy. By the time Oluwaseun Adebayo turned 25, Lagos society saw him as every mother's dream. Handsome, well-mannered, educated abroad, and heir to a fortune that could not be measured. But behind the polished image was a young man who still looked to his mother before taking a step. Son trusted Mrs. Beatrice completely. She had been his world since childhood, his teacher, his protector, his voice. When others learned independence through mistakes, Son learned obedience through love. He believed deeply that his mother always knew best. After all, she had carried him through grief, defended his inheritance, and stood between him and a world she constantly warned was dangerous. If Beatrice said a deal was risky, Son withdrew. If she frowned at a friendship, he quietly stepped away. If she remained silent about a woman, he took it as a clear no. People admired his humility, but few noticed the hesitation in his eyes whenever decisions arose. Confidence in public, uncertainty in private. That was Son. He was intelligent, kind, and generous, yet he doubted his own judgment. The habit of seeking approval had become second nature. At home, their bond was unmistakable. Beatrice called him several times a day, even when he traveled. She wanted to know what he ate, who he met, how he felt. Son answered every call without complaint. It made her feel needed, and it made him feel safe. "You know I only want what's best for you," she would say. And Son believed her, completely. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, a strange restlessness stirred within him. He watched other men his age fall in love freely, argue, make mistakes, and grow. He wondered what it would feel like to choose something for himself without fear of disappointing the one person he loved most. Yet the thought of hurting his mother filled him with guilt. How could he question her when she had sacrificed so much? How could he desire independence when she had built her entire life around protecting him? Love tied him to her more tightly than any rule ever could. So Son stayed close. He laughed when she laughed. He nodded when she spoke. He became exactly who she needed him to be. And Mrs. Beatrice, watching her son remain within reach, felt reassured. To her, his obedience was proof of good upbringing, of loyalty, of success. She never saw it as dependence, only devotion. Neither of them realized that a heart kept too close never learns how to stand on its own. And somewhere within Son, beneath the layers of respect and fear, a quiet longing waited, patient, unnoticed, and ready to change everything when it finally found its voice. The maid called Amaka. Amaka arrived at the Adebayo mansion on a quiet Monday morning, carrying a small nylon bag that held her entire life. She was barely 20, slim, soft-spoken, and unsure of herself, with eyes that had seen hardship far too early. She had come from a village outside Owerri, sent by a distant aunt who worked through an agency that supplied domestic staff to wealthy homes in Lagos. The Adebayo house intimidated her. The tall gates, the marble floors, the silence that echoed louder than noise. It all made her feel small. From the first day, she understood her place clearly. She was a maid. Invisible, replaceable, expected to work, obey, and never cross boundaries. And Amaka did exactly that. She woke before dawn, cleaned tirelessly, spoke only when spoken to, and kept her head bowed at all times. She was respectful to everyone, even those who barely noticed her existence. Unlike some staff who complained quietly among themselves, Amaka accepted her fate with humility shaped by years of struggle. Son noticed her before she noticed him. It was not her beauty that caught his attention at first, it was her gentleness. She moved through the house like someone afraid of disturbing the air. When spoken to, she listened fully, not halfway. When thanked, she smiled with genuine surprise, as though kindness was unfamiliar to her. Their first real conversation happened by accident. One evening, Son walked into the kitchen to get water when he found Amaka there, struggling to open a stubborn bottle. She froze when she saw him, immediately dropping her hands and lowering her head. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. Son was taken aback, not by the apology, but by the fear in her voice. "You don't have to be scared," he said gently, taking the bottle and opening it for her. "You're not in trouble." Amaka nodded quickly, but her hands still trembled. That moment stayed with him. From then on, he began to notice her more. The way she hummed softly while cleaning, the way she smiled to herself when she thought no one was watching, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about simple things like food or home. She did not speak of ambition or status. She spoke of peace. And peace was something Son had never known. Their interactions remained careful at first, short greetings, polite exchanges, harmless questions. But slowly, something warm began to grow between them. With Amaka, Son did not feel like an heir or a name. He felt like a person. Amaka, on her part, was confused. She knew her place. She knew the rules. Falling for someone like Son was dangerous, impossible, even. Yet she could not deny the way her heart reacted when he spoke kindly to her, when he asked how her day had been, when he treated her like she mattered. She prayed about it often, asking God to remove feelings she knew could only bring trouble. But feelings do not listen to prayers alone. Unknowingly, within the walls of a house built on reputation and control, something fragile and powerful was beginning to bloom. A connection neither of them had planned, and one the Adebayo household was never prepared to accept. The maid called Amaka was no longer just staff. She was becoming the quiet center of Son's heart, and the storm that would soon change everything. Love and silence. By the time Amaka had been in the Adebayo mansion for 6 months, Son realized that what he felt for her had grown beyond admiration. It was a truth he could not ignore, a feeling that made his chest tighten and his mind wander when she was not around. He fell in love with her, but he could never say it. Every time he imagined telling her, his mother's voice echoed in his mind. No woman can touch the Adebayo name without earning it. No one must take advantage of you, Son. The thought of disappointing Beatrice paralyzed him. The very woman who had protected him, guided him, and raised him from a boy into a man was the same one who would never approve of him being with a maid. And so he kept his feelings locked away, hidden behind polite smiles and casual gestures. He noticed every detail about Amaka. The way her eyes lit up when she spoke about small joys from her village, the way she laughed softly at jokes only she understood, the way she carried herself with dignity despite being constantly reminded of her place in the mansion. He found himself seeking excuses to see her, asking for a glass of water, accidentally entering the kitchen, lingering near her while she arranged flowers in the living room. Amaka, in her own way, began to notice him too. She felt warmth in his gaze, a kindness she had never experienced before in such a wealthy home. She tried to dismiss it. After all, he was the master of the house, untouchable, unreachable. Their worlds were so different. Yet she could not ignore the way her heart quickened whenever he spoke her name or lingered just a little too long in her presence. Son's heart ached with the knowledge that their love could never be spoken aloud. Every time he imagined a life with Amaka, he was reminded of the walls his mother had built, walls of wealth, walls of pride, and walls of expectation. And so, he loved her silently, hiding his feelings behind obedience, respect, and unspoken longing. Sometimes, late at night, he would watch her from afar, tidying up, humming softly, unaware that the heir of the Adebayo Empire was quietly entranced by her. He wanted to tell her the truth, to take her hands and confess that she was the only person he had ever loved. But fear kept him mute. Fear of losing his mother's approval, fear of scandal, fear of shattering the fragile balance of the world his mother had so carefully constructed. Love, in the Adebayo mansion, was a secret rebellion. And little did they know, the silence and restraint could not last forever. For in a house where wealth, pride, and power ruled, hearts rarely remained quiet when destiny decided to intervene. Amaka was about to become more than a quiet presence in Son's life. She was about to become the center of a storm that would challenge everything he knew about love, loyalty, and family. A hidden pregnancy. Life in the Adebayo mansion had returned to its usual rhythm, yet beneath the polished surface, a storm was quietly brewing. Son and Amaka continued their silent connection, small smiles exchanged in hallways, whispered jokes during chores, fleeting glances that lasted just a heartbeat too long. It was a love that neither dared to name aloud, yet it existed in every moment they shared. But the world is rarely patient with secrets. One morning, Amaka felt different. The fatigue she tried to hide was no longer a simple tiredness. Her body whispered a truth she could not ignore. She was pregnant. Fear and confusion gripped her. She had no husband, no support beyond the young man she loved quietly, and the mother who ruled the mansion with an iron hand. The thought of telling anyone made her stomach churn. And yet, secrets have a way of finding light. Beatrice, ever vigilant, noticed subtle changes before anyone else did. A hand lingering over Amaka's stomach, a sudden paleness, moments of weakness that could not be explained by overwork alone. She began asking questions in a tone that left no room for evasion. Amaka avoided eye contact, knowing that even a hint of truth could unravel the delicate balance she had tried so hard to maintain. But secrets in the Adebayo house have a short life. One afternoon, Beatrice found Amaka alone in the servants' quarters, her face pale, her hands trembling. The moment their eyes met, Beatrice knew. She did not need words. Every mother senses danger. Every matriarch senses disruption. And in that instant, Beatrice's mind raced, not with concern for Amaka, but with a terrifying vision of scandal. A maid pregnant by her son. The thought alone was enough to make her blood run cold. Pride, fear, and anger collided within her. She felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious, all in the same breath. Amaka tried to explain, her voice quivering. She pleaded, begged, and apologized for something she had no control over, something born of love and circumstance. But Beatrice would not hear it. Her world, her reputation, the Adebayo name, all felt threatened by the revelation. Without hesitation, she made a decision, one that would forever change the course of their lives. She paid Amaka, handed her a sum meant to silence her, and ordered her to leave the house immediately. No excuses, no compromises, no second chances. The maid who had quietly stolen her son's heart was now exiled. Son arrived moments later, too late to intervene. He pleaded with his mother, desperation in his eyes, fear in his voice. "Please, mother, she is carrying my child. We can make this right." But Beatrice's heart was like stone. "I cannot allow this," she said coldly. "She must go, and she will not return." The decision was final. As Amaka left the mansion that evening, her small bag in her hand, her heart breaking, Son watched helplessly. For the first time, the weight of his obedience collided with the depth of his love. He could not speak. He could not act. And in that silence, a new kind of grief began, a grief that would haunt him and his mother in ways neither could yet imagine. The Adebayo mansion remained gleaming and untouched, but inside, the foundations were quietly cracking. The heir's heart had been broken, the mother's pride had hardened, and a single life growing in secret carried the promise of a storm no one could prevent. Pride over compassion. The Adebayo mansion was quieter than usual after Amaka's departure. The grand halls, which usually echoed with polite laughter and the soft murmur of servants, now seemed hollow, an emptiness that even the chandeliers and gold-trimmed walls could not mask. Mrs. Beatrice Adebayo sat in her study, hands folded on the polished mahogany desk, staring at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Pride had guided her decisions, but now, for the first time, the silence pressed heavily against her chest. She told herself she had done the right thing. She had protected the family name. She had upheld the integrity that had defined the Adebayo legacy for generations. A maid carrying her son's child was a scandal too dangerous to ignore. Every boardroom, every gala, every social gathering would be poisoned by whispers and judgment if Amaka remained under their roof. Yet, despite her certainty, a quiet unease lingered. Son, meanwhile, could not contain the turmoil in his heart. The obedient son, the young heir who had always followed his mother's every command, now felt trapped between love and duty, grief and helplessness. For days, he wandered the mansion like a ghost, unable to focus on meetings, unable to sleep, unable to eat. Every corner of the house reminded him of Amaka. The kitchen where she had hummed while cooking, the garden where she had watered flowers with care, the stairs she had climbed with quiet grace. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, Son confronted his mother. His voice trembled with a mixture of desperation and anger. "Mother, please. You don't understand. She is carrying my child. You can't just throw her out. We can fix this together." Beatrice's eyes, usually so gentle in private moments, hardened. "Son, listen to me carefully. This cannot happen. The Adebayo name cannot be compromised. You are everything I have. If I allow this, everything your father built, everything I have sacrificed, will crumble. I am protecting you. I am protecting us." Son fell silent, the weight of her words pressing down on him. But silence could not quell the storm inside him. His love for Amaka was not something he could control. His mother's protection, meant to shelter him, now felt like chains. Days passed. Son pleaded, bargained, even tried to reason with his mother, but Beatrice's pride was immovable. Compassion had no place in the house ruled by fear of scandal. She believed she was right, and in her certainty, she failed to see the growing devastation. It was in those days, amidst unspoken tension and hidden tears, that Son began to understand the cost of obedience. Pride, when mistaken for duty, could wound more deeply than any enemy. And for the first time, he realized that the love he carried in silence, love for a woman his mother could never accept, might destroy him. As the sun set over Lagos that evening, casting long shadows over the mansion, a profound sadness settled over Son. He could not speak. He could not act. He could only suffer in quiet despair, trapped between his mother's unyielding pride and the love that had come too late, too quietly, to find its voice. In the house where wealth ruled and reputation reigned, the heart of the air broke silently, unseen, unheard, and the first cracks of tragedy began to appear. A son's broken plea. Son's desperation grew each day, gnawing at him like a silent predator. Every morning, he woke with the memory of Amaka leaving the mansion, the soft click of the front gate behind her still ringing in his ears. The house felt like a cage now, a gilded prison built by his own mother's hands. He wandered the halls, trying to focus on meetings, on numbers, on strategies, but nothing could drown the emptiness that consumed him. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, Son found his mother in her private study. The room was dimly lit, the city lights reflecting off the polished surfaces like tiny sparks of a world he no longer belonged to. His voice, usually calm and measured, trembled with raw emotion. "Mother, please," he began, dropping to his knees before her chair. "I am begging you. Bring her back. Let her stay. She is carrying my child. We can do this together. We can make it right. I am asking you not as your son, but as the man who loves her." Beatrice's eyes widened at the sight of him on his knees. For a moment, she seemed unsure, as though the weight of his words had cracked her armor. But pride, that ever-present shield, immediately regained its place. "Son, do you understand what you are asking?" she said, her voice firm but shaking slightly. "Do you understand what this would mean? The whispers, the judgment, the scandal? I have spent my life protecting you from people who would devour you. You cannot throw it all away for this." "I don't care about the scandal," Son shouted, tears streaming down his face. "I care about her, about my child, about us. I have always listened to you. But this is different. Please, mother. I am begging you." Beatrice looked down at her son, the man she had raised with such care, and felt a pang of fear she could not name. His desperation was raw, undeniable, and heartbreaking. Yet the wall she had built around herself and the Adebayo name would not fall. "Not now. Not ever. No," she said finally, her voice cold and resolute. "I cannot allow it. She must leave. And you must accept it. It is the only way to protect everything your father and I have built." Son's shoulders slumped, and the color drained from his face. The plea he had poured from the depths of his soul had failed. The mother he had trusted with every part of his life had turned away, leaving him powerless. That night, Son sat alone in his room, staring at the ceiling, feeling a despair deeper than anything he had ever known. The mansion, once his sanctuary, now felt like a hollow tomb. The love he could not express, the woman he could not have, and the child who was growing without a home, all of it pressed upon him like an unbearable weight. In the silence of that room, he realized a terrible truth. Sometimes, the people we trust most can also be the ones who hurt us the deepest. And sometimes, obedience, no matter how loyal, cannot save a heart from breaking. Outside, Lagos glittered with life and laughter, unaware of the tragedy unfolding in one of its grandest homes. Inside, the heir of the Adebayo Empire sat alone, his soul cracking under the weight of a love that would not be allowed, and a mother's pride that refused to bend. The first real shadows of despair had fallen across the mansion, and nothing would ever be the same again. The silence that followed. The days after Son's desperate plea passed like a slow, suffocating fog over the Adebayo mansion. The house, once filled with the quiet hum of luxury and order, now carried a hollow stillness that even the servants could not ignore. Laughter had vanished, replaced by a heavy, unspoken tension. Son wandered the rooms like a ghost, his presence barely noticed even by those who served him. He did not eat much. Meals were left untouched. The tailored suits that had once fit him perfectly now felt like armor he could not bear. Business meetings became formalities, his sharp mind dulled by the grief and longing he carried silently. Every corner of the house reminded him of Amaka. Her soft humming in the kitchen, the way she had arranged the flowers on the windowsill, her quiet, graceful movements that had so effortlessly stolen his heart. Beatrice noticed his withdrawal but chose to interpret it as mere sadness, a phase that would pass. She told herself she had done the right thing. She believed she was protecting her son, protecting the Adebayo name, and shielding everyone from a scandal that could ruin them. But even as she reassured herself, there were moments when she caught herself staring at the empty space where Amaka's presence had once been and felt a pang she could not name. Son's sorrow was not just for Amaka. It was for the life they could have had, the laughter, the shared secrets, the possibility of family. He missed the small moments of connection that had given his life warmth, moments now denied to him by his mother's unyielding pride. The world he had once observed quietly now felt cold and unforgiving, a gilded cage from which he could not escape. He began to withdraw from everyone, even friends and distant relatives who once sought his company. They saw only a polite young man, quiet and obedient, unaware of the storm raging inside him. Behind the calm exterior, Son's heart was breaking. Every night, he stared at the ceiling of his room, imagining Amaka and the child she carried, wondering if they were safe, if they were well, if they thought of him as he thought of them. Beatrice, for her part, remained busy with meetings, galas, and business deals, but the mansion itself seemed different now, colder, quieter, lacking the warmth that had once defined it. The staff whispered among themselves, noticing the change in the young master, noticing the cracks in the matriarch's armor that no one dared speak of. The silence that followed was more than the absence of sound. It was the weight of unspoken grief, the pressure of lost love, the suffocating tension of pride standing in the way of compassion. It was a silence that filled every room, every hallway, every golden corner of the mansion. And in that silence, the first seeds of tragedy began to grow. Son's heart, long trained to obey, could no longer find peace. His sorrow festered, deepened, and began to demand a release that the world around him refused to offer. In the grandest mansion in Lagos, surrounded by wealth, power, and reputation, a young man's soul was quietly unraveling, and no one, not even his mother, could see the depth of the cracks forming in the foundation of their lives. The mansion had everything it needed to shine, but within, the heir of the Adebayo name was slowly losing the will to live in a world that had taken from him the only person he had ever loved. And yet, at that very moment, destiny was already moving, unseen, toward the small, hidden life that would one day challenge everything Beatrice believed she controlled. A mother's greatest loss. The night Son died, the Adebayo mansion seemed to sense the tragedy before anyone could. The chandeliers flickered as though mourning, and the usual hum of life, the soft shuffle of servants, the distant sounds of Lagos traffic, felt muted, as if the city itself had paused to grieve. Beatrice had been in her study, reviewing contracts late into the night. She was accustomed to discipline, to order, to control, but nothing had prepared her for the knock on the door that shattered her world. It was the family doctor, a man she trusted without question, and his face was pale, the words he spoke shaking her carefully maintained composure. "Mrs. Adebayo, it's Son. He's gone." For a moment, Beatrice could not breathe. The room seemed to spin around her. The air was thick, heavy, unyielding. She dropped into her chair, clutching the desk as though it could anchor her to reality. "No, no, that's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He was my son, my only son." The truth struck her like a thunderclap. Son, her pride, her joy, her reason for enduring years of grief and relentless responsibility, was gone. The boy she had protected, guided, and controlled with such meticulous care had been crushed by heartbreak she had caused. She remembered that night, the day she refused to bring Amaka back, the cold words, the pride that had kept her from compassion. Every harsh decision, every act of control, now felt like a dagger piercing her heart. Beatrice fell to her knees, sobbing in a way she had never allowed herself in front of anyone. Her entire life had been built on protecting the Adebayo name, yet in her pursuit of perfection, she had lost the one life that mattered most. Wealth, status, influence, none of it could bring him back. The mansion, immaculate and grand, suddenly felt suffocating. Every polished floor, every golden ornament, every symbol of power now seemed meaningless. The house had been her fortress, but it had become a prison of grief. In the days that followed, Beatrice wandered the rooms aimlessly, haunted by memories of Son. The way he had smiled at her when she praised him, the quiet obedience that had once made her proud, the small acts of kindness she had dismissed as ordinary. Now, each memory felt like a blade. She began to understand the cruel irony of her life. In trying to protect him, she had driven him to despair. In trying to uphold the Adebayo legacy, she had destroyed the only person who truly embodied it. The city continued its noisy, vibrant life outside the mansion walls, oblivious to the tragedy within. But inside, Beatrice faced a silence heavier than any she had known, a silence filled with regret, guilt, and unbearable sorrow. For the first time in her life, the matriarch of the Adebayo family felt powerless. No business deal, no social standing, no reputation could undo the irreparable. Her son was gone, and with his death, Beatrice's world, carefully built on pride and control, crumbled into dust. Some losses leave scars that never heal. This was one of them. Little did she know, however, that life had not yet finished teaching her about love, redemption, and the unexpected ways in which fate can restore what pride has taken. But first, she had to confront the consequences of her actions and find a way to face the child she had once rejected. The search for Amaka. Son's death left a void in the Adebayo mansion that no amount of wealth, reputation, or power could fill. Beatrice wandered the halls like a ghost, her grief a constant, suffocating weight. She realized, with a pain sharper than any she had ever known, that in protecting her son, she had destroyed him. And now, there was only one way to find even the smallest measure of redemption: Amaka. The thought of the maid she had once dismissed and paid off haunted her constantly. She had to find her. She had to see the child Son had loved, the child that carried the last trace of her son's heart. Pride had ruled her for too long. Now, only urgency and sorrow guided her. Beatrice mobilized everything at her disposal. The agency that had sent Amaka, old contacts in the city, and even private investigators were called upon. No detail was too small, no lead ignored. The search for the young woman and her unborn children became an obsession. Days turned into weeks. Beatrice received countless reports. No sign of her. She has moved. She has taken refuge in a village outside the city. Each update deepened her anxiety, but she pressed on, refusing to allow failure. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a breakthrough came. Amaka had given birth, not to one child, but 4 quadruplets. The news hit Beatrice like a tidal wave of emotion. For lives, innocent and helpless, connected forever to the son she had lost. She did not hesitate. She arranged for a visit, insisting that no one, not even the staff or neighbors, know she was coming. Pride was still there, but now it mingled with desperation, with a need for reconciliation that had been absent before. When Beatrice finally met Amaka, she was overwhelmed. The young woman, exhausted and worn but glowing with the strength of motherhood, looked at her with cautious eyes. She had every right to distrust the woman who had cast her out, yet there was a trace of hope in her expression, as if she, too, longed for acknowledgement, for apology, for connection. Beatrice fell to her knees in front of Amaka, tears streaming down her face. I was wrong," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was so afraid of losing you that I failed to protect my son in the only way that mattered with love. Please, let me make this right. Bring the children. Come home. Everything I have, everything your children need, it is yours." Amaka, stunned, did not respond immediately. She studied the woman before her, the mother of the man she had loved, the woman who had once been her enemy and now appeared broken and repentant. She could feel the sincerity, the regret, the depth of a grief that mirrored her own. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Amaka nodded. I will come," she said softly, her voice tinged with relief and apprehension. "For the children. And for him." Beatrice rose, embracing Amaka gently. In that moment, the weight of guilt and pride began to lift, replaced by hope. The Adebayo mansion would no longer be a place of sorrow and control. It could become a home filled with life, forgiveness, and the memory of a son who had loved too deeply. The search was over. Now began the journey of healing, redemption, and the quiet rebuilding of a family torn apart by fear, pride, and a love once silenced. And in that small, sacred space of reunion, Beatrice understood something profound. Sometimes, it takes losing everything to truly know what matters most. The heir was gone, but his love, and the lives it had created, would remain, binding the family together in ways even wealth and power could never achieve. Reunion and redemption. The day Amaka returned to the Adebayo mansion was unlike any other. The sun shone brighter, the air seemed lighter, and even the city of Lagos felt somehow smaller. as if it too recognized the significance of what was happening inside the grand estate. Beatrice had waited tirelessly, preparing the house, not for appearances, not for status, but for the children. When Amaka stepped through the front gate, carrying the 4 tiny bundles wrapped carefully in soft cloth, Beatrice felt tears blur her vision. She had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of seeing the children her son had left behind, the living proof of his love, his heart, and his life. "Come inside," Beatrice said softly, opening the doors wide. This is your home now." Amaka hesitated at first, a mix of caution and relief in her eyes. But the sincerity in Beatrice's voice, the exhaustion etched on her face, and the warmth that had finally replaced cold pride gave her courage. Slowly, she stepped in, the children nestled safely in her arms. Son's room had been left untouched after his death, and Beatrice insisted that Amaka be shown the space. The young mother walked carefully, her fingers brushing the furniture, the photographs, the small details of a life Son had inhabited. Her heart ached with both grief and gratitude. I can't believe you did all this," Amaka whispered, looking at Beatrice. "After everything, after leaving me, you brought me back?" Beatrice sank to her knees again, overwhelmed by emotions she had never allowed herself to show. "I was wrong," she admitted, voice trembling. "I was so afraid, so proud, that I forgot what truly matters. Son's life, his love, your children. They are more important than reputation, more important than wealth, more important than anything I have ever known." For the first time, Amaka allowed herself to breathe fully. The fear, the uncertainty, the long months of struggle were slowly giving way to relief. Here was a woman who had once been her adversary, now offering forgiveness and a home. And the mansion itself seemed to respond. The golden walls, once symbols of pride and control, now reflected warmth and welcome. The air felt alive with possibility, filled with the quiet promise of healing. Over the next few days, Beatrice ensured that Amaka and the children were settled. Rooms were prepared, supplies provided, and everything necessary to start a new chapter was arranged. She watched quietly, sometimes from a distance, sometimes close, marveling at the bond forming between Amaka and the little ones. She understood that the children were not only Son's legacy. They were a second chance for her as a mother, a chance to correct the mistakes of the past. Amaka, though cautious, began to trust. She saw the genuine remorse in Beatrice's eyes, the unspoken love for the grandchildren, and the willingness to sacrifice pride for family. Slowly, walls that had once separated them began to crumble. That evening, as the sun set over Lagos, the 4 babies slept peacefully in their new home, and Beatrice sat quietly beside Amaka. Words were few, but the silence between them was full of understanding. Forgiveness had begun, love was finding its place, and the memory of Son lingered not as a wound, but as a bridge connecting the past with the future. In that quiet, sacred moment, the Adebayo mansion transformed. No longer a fortress of control, it became a haven of family, compassion, and the enduring power of love. Son was gone, but his legacy, through Amaka, through the children, and through the mother who had finally learned to let go of pride, would ensure that he would never truly be forgotten. And for the first time in years, Beatrice allowed herself to hope, healing, and harmony. The weeks that followed Amaka's return were filled with quiet miracles. The Adebayo mansion, once cold and solemn, now hummed with the life of laughter, footsteps, and tiny voices. Beatrice, who had spent years commanding attention and respect, now found herself learning patience and tenderness in ways she never had before. The lessons came slowly, through midnight feedings, soft cries, and the gentle demands of 4 little lives that were at once fragile and fearless. Son's children, 2 boys and 2 girls, grew quickly, their presence a daily reminder of the love their father had carried and the mistakes their grandmother had made. Beatrice watched them carefully, marveling at the small quirks that reminded her of Son. The way one of the boys tilted his head when curious, the way one of the girls hummed softly when she was happy, the tiny hands that reached instinctively for warmth and comfort. Amaka, once timid and cautious, began to blossom in the mansion she had once been exiled from. She walked freely through the halls, laughing softly with the children, learning the rhythms of a household she had once feared. Her trust in Beatrice grew steadily, though it was tempered by the memory of past rejection. Slowly, she began to see that forgiveness could be more powerful than resentment and love more enduring than pride. Beatrice, for her part, devoted herself entirely to her grandchildren. She held them, fed them, and guided Amaka with a gentleness that had been absent in the days of rigid control. She apologized often, not just in words but in deeds, ensuring that Amaka felt respected, valued, and secure. For the first time in her life, she realized that integrity was not only about reputation. It was also about love, compassion, and the courage to make amends. The household settled into a new rhythm. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows as Beatrice and Amaka prepared breakfast for the children. Afternoon walks in the mansion's garden became moments of shared laughter. Evenings were filled with quiet stories of Son, the boy who had loved deeply, whose absence now served as a guiding force for everyone. Neighbors and staff alike noticed the transformation. The mansion, once distant and intimidating, now felt warm and alive. The children's laughter became a bridge, connecting the past's pain to a future full of hope. Beatrice, who had once equated love with control, discovered that the most enduring bonds are built on trust, humility, and shared joy. One evening, as the golden light of sunset bathed the mansion, Beatrice and Amaka stood together watching the children play. Amaka turned to her, eyes soft, and said quietly, "Thank you for letting us come home." Beatrice smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "No, my dear," she replied gently. "Thank you for showing me how to truly be a family." And in that moment, the Adebayo mansion, once a fortress of pride and fear, became a home of healing, harmony, and the enduring power of love. A home where the past was honored, mistakes were forgiven, and the future, though uncertain, was bright with possibility. Son was gone, but his love lived on, in his children, in Amaka, and in the heart of the mother who had finally learned that family, above all, is worth every sacrifice. The mansion had finally found peace. Legacy of love. Months passed, and the Adebayo mansion transformed into a home unlike any it had ever been. The echoes of grief that had haunted its grand halls after Son's death were replaced by the vibrant sound of life. For children laughing, playing, and growing under the careful, loving watch of their mother and grandmother. Beatrice, once defined by pride and control, had learned to bend, to listen, and to love without expectation. The lessons had come painfully, but they had changed her. She spent her days guiding the children, helping Amaka manage the household, and honoring the memory of the son she had lost. Every smile of the little ones, every question they asked about their father, every shared moment of joy felt like a tribute to Son's enduring spirit. Amaka, now confident and radiant in her role as mother, had grown into a true partner in the household. She and Beatrice had forged a bond stronger than mistrust, a partnership built on respect, understanding, and shared devotion to the children. Together, they created a home where love, not status, determined value. The four children flourished, each reflecting a piece of Son's spirit. There was his curiosity, his kindness, his gentle humor, and his resilience. They were reminders that life, even after tragedy, could continue beautifully. Beatrice often found herself watching them play in the garden, imagining what Son would have been like as a father, and feeling both sorrow and gratitude for the legacy he had left behind. Over time, the family became the talk of Lagos, but not for scandal or wealth. Instead, people spoke of the mansion where love had conquered pride, where forgiveness had healed wounds, and where a mother and a young woman had come together to raise four children in peace. The Adebayo name, once synonymous with strict propriety and social climbing, now carried a story of redemption and humanity. One quiet evening, as the children slept, Beatrice and Amaka sat together in the study, a soft light casting shadows across the walls. "Your son," Amaka began, her voice gentle. "He would be so proud of this, of all of us." Beatrice reached across the table, taking her hand. "Yes," she whispered, tears glistening. "And I am finally proud, not of wealth or status, but of love. That is the true legacy of Son Adebayo." The mansion, once a symbol of control and fear, had become a sanctuary of hope, a testament to the power of forgiveness, and a home where the past mistakes had been transformed into lessons for the future. The story of pride, heartbreak, and redemption had ended not in loss, but in life, laughter, and love. Son's name lived on, not only in the memories of his mother and Amaka, but in the hearts of four children who carried his spirit forward, the living proof that love, even when silenced, always finds a way to endure. And so, the Adebayo family, rebuilt and renewed, stepped into the future, forever changed, forever bound, and forever guided by a legacy not of wealth, but of the heart. A future rewritten. Years had passed since Amaka returned to the Adebayo mansion, and the household had settled into a rhythm filled with love, laughter, and shared memories. The children had grown into curious, spirited young kids, each carrying a piece of Son's heart, his kindness, and his quiet strength. The mansion itself, once a place of rigid order and cold grandeur, now vibrated with life, warmth, and the joy of family. Beatrice, now older and wiser, had transformed into a grandmother who knew that true legacy was not measured in wealth or influence, but in the love one leaves behind. She often watched Amaka play with the children in the garden, quietly reflecting on the path that had brought them here, from pride and tragedy to forgiveness and reunion. Every laughter, every tiny hand holding hers, felt like a balm for the grief she had carried for so long. Amaka had blossomed into a confident, resilient woman. The mansion was no longer intimidating to her. It was home. She had found her place not by submission, but through the respect she earned and the love she shared with both the children and Beatrice. Their bond, once strained by fear and misunderstanding, had become unshakable. One evening, as the children slept, Beatrice and Amaka sat on the veranda, watching the sun sink into the Lagos skyline. The air was warm, filled with the sounds of crickets and distant city life. Beatrice spoke softly, her voice carrying the weight of lessons learned. "I was wrong," she said, "so wrong about many things. I let pride blind me. I let fear take from me the thing that mattered most. But you have taught me that love is stronger than fear, stronger than wealth, stronger than anything I ever believed." Amaka smiled, reaching out to take her hand. "We've all learned," she said. "Son may not be here, but he lives in them and in us. That's the future he wanted." Beatrice nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes, the future he wanted. And it's a future I will protect with everything I have." In the years that followed, the Adebayo mansion became known not for its wealth or social prominence, but as a home where love had triumphed over pride, where mistakes were acknowledged, and where a family had been rebuilt stronger than ever. The children grew up knowing the story of their father, of the mother who had loved fiercely, and of the grandmother who had learned to bend for love. Son's memory no longer brought pain, it brought purpose. His life, his love, and the lessons he left behind had rewritten the family's legacy. And the mansion, once a symbol of control and fear, had become a beacon of hope, proof that even the deepest wounds could be healed with courage, humility, and love. The story of the Adebayo family had not ended in tragedy. It had evolved into something far greater, a testament that the bonds of family, when nurtured with forgiveness and understanding, could endure any storm. And in that enduring love, the spirit of Son lived on, guiding the family he had loved so deeply, ensuring that their future, once uncertain, was now bright, full, and unbreakable. Thanks for watching. Please like, share with friends, and subscribe for more amazing stories.